gang. Window down, yelling out money, anything. Ayy, ooh, got the foot on the gas. Pedal to the metal when I'm getting to the back. Ayy, got the foot on the gas. Pedal to the metal when the lane moving fast. Ayy, ayy, let them all cross. If they hate, then let them hate and make a bigger boss. Ayy.
Hey guys, before we jump into the episode, I wanted to let you know it is brought to you by Revolutionizing, the official TMS provider for the Freight Coach. You guys, I've been a broker for a long time, and the tools that are at your disposal with Revolutionizing help you eliminate bouncing between systems, which improves your accuracy when you are managing multiple tasks throughout your workday. Plus, it's built into the Salesforce cloud, so your CRM is fully integrated with your TMS, eliminating yet another silo. In today's day and age, you are definitely concerned about the safety of your data. With Revolutionizing, it's fully protected. They have cutting-edge security that keeps your information safe so you can focus on what matters most, and that's growing your business. Speaking of growing your business, with Rate and Lane IQ, you get real-time pricing and route recommendations, helping you optimize costs and improve operational efficiencies, which ultimately helps you make smarter decisions. If you are like me and have recurring shipments from non-EDI customers, they have intuitive cloning features that let you easily replicate previous shipments, saving both shipper and carrier rates with just a few taps. If you are ready to learn more, visit www.revanova.com to request a demo. Just do me a favor and let them know that the Freight Coach sent you. This episode is brought to you by SPI Logistics, the premier freight agent logistics firm in North America. For over 40 years, SPI has been diligently building the most successful freight agent network to provide first-class relationships for our shippers, receivers, and carrier partners. We are more than another transportation network. We are a dedicated team of professionals united by one singular purpose, and that is to expedite our agents' success. All of our agents are set up for success on day one, as they are provided with a full suite of support staff that is ready to assist them with everything from after-hours emergencies to financial and administrative needs on a no-fee basis. This way, you can focus on continuing to grow your business. There is no financial risk to start, and you have the ability to earn up to 75% in commissions. If you are looking to take control of your financial future and build your business with the backing of one of the most successful logistics firms in North America, visit www.spi3pl.com to learn more. Do me a favor and let them know that the Freight Coach sent you. What is up, ladies and gentlemen? We are back. We are live. It is the Freight Coach Podcast, the top podcast in transportation, coming to you guys every single weekday, 8:30 a.m. Pacific, 10:30 Central, to break down some industry headlines. But most importantly, you guys provide some actual insight into what you can do with all of this information. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. This is the real side of freight, ladies and gentlemen. And I say that before every single show. And what I mean by that is I only speak with transportation professionals, because at the end of the day, I want to talk to the right individuals who have done what you're looking to do or who are currently doing what you're trying to achieve. So you can take that information, apply it, utilize it, and see a meaningful difference in your business and your life. Happy Tuesday, everybody. I got a very special guest for you guys here today. I'm pretty sure this is the first time we're going to be talking about this topic on this show, and we've done like 1,400 episodes. So it's like really rare that I get to speak to an individual who is building a product for our industry that I have like minimal experience with. So like, I am very excited to talk about this today because, there's a lot of stuff in freight tech right now that, it's making strides. And, there's also massive components of this industry that are completely untapped. And I think when it comes down to mapping out the country with a bunch of awesome technology, that's untapped. And we're going to talk about that today. So I have Katherine Hunt on the show to break it all down. Katherine, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today.
Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
No, same here. Like our mutual friend, Ryan Joyce, when I had originally saw him tag your company on a LinkedIn post and I started looking into it, I'm like, hey, this is actually really cool. Like, I've never, you don't think about how the country is, how the roadways are mapped out, how anything. And then in my world in freight, we do a lot of overdimensional freight, needing permits and everything else. And it's like, I started connecting the dots. I'm like, this could like kind of change the game on routing freight around the country and getting the most efficient routes out there. But, before we get into any of this stuff, Katherine, what brought you to the point where you're like, I want to jump in and build this company up?
It was a lot of, I would say, little steps. So I kind of started in federal government. So worked for them for about 10 years, doing a lot of what I consider both in the commercial and the government space technical operations. So I deployed, designed, and maintained technical systems out of embassies throughout the world for about 10 years. And really that taught me the building blocks of how to logistically get equipment to the field, plan some of these operations, and then, how do you troubleshoot and maintain technical systems while they're in the field, and really leverage that experience to start a mobile mapping services company in 2020. So took everything, all those lessons learned, and use them to collect mobile LiDAR and imagery almost exclusively from the roadway at a large scale for infrastructure. So did a lot of work with telecom and transportation, and then quickly learned about some of the, I would say, freight challenges that are tangential to those industries with respect to exactly what you said, like oversized loads, vertical clearances, and really recognize that the data that we were collecting can be mined for all of that information. So I consider us like freight adjacent, but I think we do serve a pretty, and will continue to serve a pretty big, I guess, purpose in that, exactly kind of the routing that you're talking about.
No, for sure. I mean, I would agree. You guys are 100% freight adjacent, but like, I don't know of anybody else who is taking this technology and, mapping out the country, right? Like, and because it's like, you think about the infrastructure of our country and how interconnected freeway systems are across the United States. And then everybody just kind of has that tribal knowledge of, hey, I've been driving these roads for 20 years and stuff like that. But with, the intelligence that you guys are bringing through the infrastructure, so like, that's what kind of gets me the most is like, how do we build better cities? Like, how do we build more efficient roadways that are out there? Because that's kind of the challenge that you see is like, you look at the rail systems, for example, they're kind of set in stone. I don't know if the rail systems are ever going to change, but you look at the freeway systems. I mean, specifically here in Arizona, where I live, they're already talking about building another freeway that runs down from the Mexico border up to Las Vegas, right? So it's like, how do we utilize a lot of this to, maybe bypass traffic bottlenecks and everything and build a more efficient roadway? So how are you guys doing that, Katherine, right now, like with the intelligence that comes with LiDAR? And can you maybe explain for the audience what LiDAR technology is?
Yeah, absolutely. So we, as you mentioned, collect LiDAR and imagery. So the imagery is similar to like Google Street View. It's panoramic imagery. So you get 360 degrees. And then we also, with that sensor, collect LiDAR. So the LiDAR puts out a laser about 1.2 million points per second, and basically blankets the environment in these points. Because it's also has a positioning unit, we know the XYZ coordinate of every single one of those points. So it creates what we call a point cloud, which ends up being, billions of discrete points, each with this unique XYZ in the world. And then we marry that with the panoramic imagery. So we use the imagery to colorize all of those points. And then we use the imagery for, visual verification when we're analyzing the data. But really what the LiDAR gives us is, depending on the sensor you use, a sub-centimeter accurate 3D digital twin of the world, which really comes into play when we're doing things that require us to take 3D measurements, whether that's a roadside asset inventory and we're trying to determine the guardrail heights, making sure those are in compliance, whether that's determining the height and lean of a pole if we're doing a utilities project. And in the case we were discussing, doing vertical clearances over every lane, looking at either overhead structures or bridge structures, really getting those refined measurements that then feed into either routing or some type of roadside asset inventory. So really we use both those data sets. LiDAR can be collected from fixed wing, from drones, from many different kind of platforms, but we find the data collected from the roadway from vehicles gives us the best vantage point on kind of what we're trying to do with the data.
So you hear about, crumbling infrastructure in the United States. There's a lot of headlines that are out there, and with advancements of technology that have obviously come down because again a lot of the roadways and the freeway systems were designed. I mean, I'm just throwing this out there 25, 30 years ago, and yeah, they get upgraded from time to time, but like you could argue not at the level that they probably need. How does your guys is this kind of like a downstream thing? Like, how much more safer from like, I mean, I'm trying to think of the best way to frame this, Katherine. Like your guys' product now, how is like the civil engineers and the DOT engineers going to be able to use this to create a more stable roadway that's going to be maybe potentially less susceptible to cracking or, sinkholes and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first, as I mentioned before, the good thing and sometimes the danger of the data we're collecting is it can be used for so many different things. For us as a company, really finding the niche and meeting the market with a product derived from this data is we've focused primarily, like I said, on a few key industries. But the DOT, like you mentioned, or any transportation industry, whether it's a port authority or turnpike, they can use the data for a multitude of things, everything from primarily they're going to use it for safety, right? They're going to use it to ensure that, like I mentioned before, their guardrails are in compliance with, heights. The guardrails are where they should be. They're not damaged. As well as looking at like pavement markings, are those faded, right? Because that's a safety issue if you can't see the pavement markings or the signs, things like that. So really leveraging the digitization of the roadway to be able to do those asset inventories and asset condition assessments at scale is going to fall first under like safety. Then you get into kind of asset management at large, beyond just safety into like maintenance, for example. Again, if you're a state like I live in Virginia, they maintain over 80,000 miles of roadway. It's kind of impractical to send boots on ground team members out to go do an asset inventory from the actual field. So they're going to use our data to do that condition assessment and try and get those assets into some type of life cycle maintenance plan. So exactly what you're saying, reduce the cost of being able to maintain those assets, at a scalable or in a scalable way is really where, we're pushing to digitize these environments. And then, you can do everything from a grass mowing in the right of way, right? You can develop a plan around the data that we provide. So lots of use cases, everything from condition assessment to maintenance plans to ensuring you're in compliance with safety can be leveraged from the same data set. So, you're spending money on that collection up front, but then there's so many things that can be done with that data. That's really where it gets exciting for us.
Yeah. So to put it into context, I think most people probably see I think they're just like the land surveyors on the road. Like anytime there's a new road construction project, you always see the person out there. It looks like they just have the laser and they're just kind of doing like section by section. Is that what essentially now from like a speed perspective, how much faster can your guys' technology accomplish that as opposed to the boots on the ground strategy that I think a lot of local and state municipalities are probably utilizing for this?
Yeah, it really depends on kind of what type of project is being done by the DOT. So something like that where it requires really high quality survey data, we can use LiDAR and imagery to kind of do that foundational survey piece. When we're looking at the roadside asset inventory, which is really our bread and butter, we're shaving off months, right? Because we're able to digitize potentially, depending on rural versus urban, 50 to 200 miles of data a day. And then once that's digitized, we can run some AI and ML as a first pass of extraction. So a project that used to take years for a DOT to kind of, let's say, do a sign inventory will take us, maybe months. And then they have that digital repository that they can go back to if they then want to do, a pavement marking inventory or something like that.
Mhm. So, do you think because I think in any day and age, especially right now, speed is everything, Catherine. And then especially when you're looking at the budgets of, the DOT and everything else and other government agencies, local municipalities, it's like I think people's appetite for the time frame of road construction and everything else is going to become like less and less, right? Like obviously I know there's only so much road you can lay out there, but if you look at the planning and the zoning and everything else that comes along with it, how much do you see that being, like with what you guys are doing and digitizing a lot of that, like the timing of that, is that going to be cut in half, 3/4? A bold guess, but like, where do you, like from what you're doing now, how do you see that fundamentally changing?
Yeah, certainly the survey component that really is the foundation for any transportation, any, telecom fiber network. They all have to do a pre-survey to know what exists already before we do any potential design construction. So the survey component we're shaving down, depending on the size, but it can be anywhere from 25 to 75% of the time, just by doing it from vehicles, digitizing the environment, and doing everything from that digital twin. The permitting piece, though, is really interesting. We really don't deal with that, but we are working with companies that are looking to automate a lot of that as well, because that can take quite a bit of time as well. So I think each component of, I would say, the end-to-end workflow is starting to implement some of these either AI or some type of machine learning to start automating and cutting down the time. It's exactly what you said, on a lot of these projects, the vendor that can, guarantee a shorter schedule is going to win. So everyone's kind of using technology for that, value out of cutting down those schedules.
How are you guys guaranteeing like the accuracy of everything? Because I could just imagine, Catherine, the amount of this is the way we've always done things. Because
Yeah.
I know you get that a lot inside of freight, in especially with freight tech, right? The biggest pushback is always this is the way we've always done it. How do you guarantee that your data is more accurate than how we're currently doing things?
Yeah, it's a great question. It comes up with almost every customer, right? So it really comes down to the quality of sensor that we're using. And so at Teleqo Tech, we employ kind of the highest quality sensors on the market. So the IMU and positioning unit are kind of top of the line. So we can do a lot of real world tests, right, where we show, line up our digital environment with survey points or monuments that have been previously surveyed. And then we also can do calibration, right, where we ensure that we are either adjusting or aligning our points with real world surveyed data locations. There are some projects that require higher quality, and in those cases, we would employ like control points to ensure tighter accuracy. For like a roadside asset inventory, typically we know what that accuracy range needs to be, but certainly things like vertical clearances, there's a little bit more at stake there with some of those measurements. So that's where you might employ some of those control points and or tying it to kind of survey points. But we typically guarantee a tighter relative accuracy, which is the point to point distances. So within the point cloud, a point from one side of the road to the other is going to be some centimeter accuracy, where sometimes the accuracy can be a little further off is on the absolute accuracy, which is where are these points on the world. But for something like a vertical clearance measurement, I care more about that point to point, like what is the true height of that vertical clearance. So the data that we're collecting is sufficient for that.
So does LiDAR go like below ground? And where I'm going with this is how are you guys able to maybe catch shifting of roads and bridges and stuff based on like the technology that you guys are doing? Because it's like, hey, the variance might be, I'm just making this up, right? Like a couple of inches that it might shift over time. Are you guys able to like kind of shorten that and be able to help improve that and be like, hey, actually, no, where this roadway is, there's like actually a high probability of this shifting and completely ruining and having to replace all of this?
Yeah, so LiDAR won't penetrate ground. However, there are technologies that do, GPR is one of them, or you can employ sensors that can kind of go underground, and we can integrate that data into our platform if it's georeferenced. So really getting a complete picture of above ground and underground, kind of in one platform is important. With regard to shifting, we definitely can do change detection. So a lot of like the DOTs will collect data maybe every other year, and then we can, using a lot of automation, detect any changes in both assets maybe going missing or being damaged, as well as, to your point, like shifting. So it's really good to get kind of these collections done at different frequencies, so they can compare, or God forbid floods come in and wipe out assets. Knowing what was there and what needs to be replaced is really important. So there is definitely value in having these historical data sets to go back and compare for exactly what you're saying, like how much has changed, and then can we predict going forward and have a preventative maintenance plan that incorporates some of those lessons learned.
Yeah, because I look at it where we have so much historical data that's out there, and then furthermore, budgets are always limited, right? When it comes down to roadways and everything else, and every part of the country, different climates, and there's so many different things that are out there, and it's like, how do we utilize this stuff to build a better road, like build a more structured road and a more stable bridge? Not saying bridges are unstable, but like, how do we utilize this stuff now to kind of protect us for that next investment? So it's like, I know that, people hear, billions of dollars now, Katherine, and they're like, oh, that's like what, $1? Mm-hmm. And it's like, there's so much money that's invested into this stuff. If we can make things last 10, 15% longer overall from the initial construction phase that goes in, how much more money does that put back in our states and local municipalities' pockets?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. Before coming on this podcast, I was definitely digging into kind of like bridge collisions as, one example of that, right? So there's an estimated between 13,000 and 18,000 bridge collisions in the US a year. Each of those is going to range around $180,000 to $300,000 in damages. And those are the ones we know about, right? My understanding, being freight adjacent, right, is if the vehicle can keep moving after they hit, they're going to keep moving, right? So that puts us between 2.7 and $4.5 trillion in damage a year. And I'm saying I think we can collect and digitize the 4.1 million miles of roadway in the US over a 5-year period, let's say, for less than $20 million a year. Like, to me, the offset in, being able to provide really quality and accurate vertical clearance data so that we can prevent a lot of these collisions, like, it's a no-brainer. But instead, we're paying trillions, and that doesn't include cargo damage, doesn't include loss of life or shutting down roads for these collisions, for what I would consider a really minimal upfront investment. So I don't know kind of when that will switch. We're certainly piloting. We collected the entire I-95 corridor from Maine to Miami as a proof of concept of digitizing long interstate corridors where we can derive this data. Certainly at enough, reduced costs that a small company can go out and do that as an internal investment. So I don't know where that shift will occur, but when you look at how much we're spending kind of on the defensive side, if we put way less into preventative, and that's not just collisions, it's across the board, I think we'd be in much better shape as taxpayers, certainly.
No, I agree with that, right? And as a taxpayer and somebody who's literally paid taxes since I was 12 years old and got my first job, I really pay attention to a lot of these things now. And we can't use that argument of this is the way we've always done things anymore, Katherine. Like, we're beyond that. And I feel like with where technology is right now, like, we have no excuse to not build a safer infrastructure out there, right? For a fraction of the cost of what it used to take to
Yes.
roll this out. So it's like, you know, you talked about the I-95 corridor that you guys ran. What was some of the like the most, I guess, like kind of like eye-popping data where you're like, how is this, like who decided to build this way?
I think for us, like it was more looking at the state of general, I would say, transportation assets, right? So, you know, we've all seen potholes, right? And we've all seen rutting and raveling on pavement, and that's certainly something the DOT is invested in, and they're, you know, trying to you know, get ahead of that as well as maintain those assets. But in general, you know, when you see part of that corridor having really delaminated signs, which is a pretty big safety concern, right? If you can't read the sign, especially at nighttime, is when that delamination really pops. Like, that's where I think we were pretty surprised to see, you know, the potential hazards that can come about from the, I would say, condition of some of these assets. And it's really, unfortunately, kind of throughout that corridor. So I think that is where we were most, I would say, a little concerned. But I think, you know, we can get ahead of that, and we can digitize this, and we can kind of help with the both inventory and condition piece to kind of help prevent some of that kind of big deterioration of the assets across the roadway.
Yeah. I look at it where the infrastructure of our country in regards to the supply chain, which is I don't think I'm being overly biased. Outside of defense of our country, the supply chain and the infrastructure of our country is like number 2 to me.
Yes.
And it's like, it's very concerning to me when I even drive around out west here and, you know, talking about the assets and like the fading road signs and everything else. And, you know, again, you're like, trucks don't stop driving at night, right? Like this is one of those things where it's like, we need to improve the physical infrastructure of our country. We got to, because transportation, like the demands of this industry have changed so much, Katherine, over my career. And like where I see it going, like the Amazon effect is very real. People's tolerance and demand to get their products faster is only going to increase out here. And it's like with where things are and like with the amount of money that is going to be needed to rebuild our country, we need to be utilizing any and all pieces of technology to get it the most safe and efficient to improve the life cycle of these assets that you're talking about, right? Because it's like, I feel like in today's day and age, if something, you know, maybe it had a 5-year life cycle, we should be looking at a minimum of 15 to 20-year life cycles from some of these assets. And you can't tell me that it's not available out there. Like, it is available out there. We just have to stop looking at this is the way that we've always done things. And, you know, I think everybody who's been alive for more than 5 minutes understand that bureaucracy kind of takes a wild turn sometimes. And I just think we have to demand more of this stuff because it's like, ultimately, it's on us to get these things fixed, right? And then, but this is like downstream what I love about the private sector. Like, this gives you an opportunity. Like, you probably didn't think, Katherine, when you were, maybe you did when you were in college, like, hey, I'm going to build this company up one day. But like, here we are, right? And that's the beauty of where things are is technology is advancing. There's so much opportunity that's out there. But I ultimately think it's the private sector that's going to fix all of this stuff.
You know, to be honest, like with the kind of push towards autonomous freight and autonomous vehicles as well, like all of those vehicles have to go back to a digital environment, right, in order to correlate what they're sensing in real time with a digital framework. And so I do think in some ways, you know, all of those roadside assets that I mentioned, the pavement markings, the lanes, the shoulders, the barriers, stop signs, all of that has to go into the digital framework for the autonomous vehicles. So in some way, that commercial world is a little bit ahead, at least at a nationwide viewpoint, because what we see with the DOTs or the turnpikes is they're so fragmented. Yeah. And so if you are going from Maine to Miami, right, it's different states the whole way who are each responsible for their own roadways and their own maintenance. And so I think in some ways the autonomous vehicle industry is aggregating this data because they know we have to go from Maine to Miami and not, have these fragmented data sets, I guess. So I agree with you. I think the commercial world is kind of pushing the boundaries because we have to. There is no national repository for vertical clearances, right? And so if you're going to do an autonomous delivery or a non-autonomous delivery across multiple states, like how do you find that data? How do you then put that into your routing or take that into consideration? So yeah, sometimes I do think the government can be ahead of us, and then other times we're kind of leading them, but it's definitely beneficial to at least have someone out ahead, right?
No, I agree with that. And, and bringing up autonomous just, a couple of short years ago, I was like, there's no way that like autonomous semis are going to be a real thing. I will be the first one to admit when my opinions change, and my opinions are starting to change on that and where it could go. Now, I almost equate it like this, Katherine, like planes have essentially been flying themselves for a very long time, but at least I'm not going to jump on an airplane if there's not two pilots. I think that is probably what we might see in our lifetime is an autonomous truck with a driver still behind the wheel, because I don't think the public's appetite is there to see that yet. And again, I could be wrong. It could change, but that's kind of where I see things going from an autonomous standpoint.
I think we see that as well with our technology where we are doing these asset inventories. I'm a huge proponent of the human in the loop, whether that's a driver in a vehicle, a pilot in a plane, or having someone quality control, automated analysis that we run. So our mindset has always been to augment that human in the loop and provide them with as much automation and tools to reduce the load on the person. But I think that's kind of that theme, I guess, crosses industries because, to your point, I would not hop on a plane anytime soon. If I didn't see two guys or two ladies in the front looking to be the human in the loop on the flight, I guess.
No, I'm right there with you. Katherine, thank you so much. I had a great, I love not talking about like fraud in the freight market every single day. And it's always great to have, especially a trucking adjacent product like yours coming on here that will have a direct effect on my industry and the job that I'm doing in the not so distant future. But how does anybody reach out to if they want to find out more about what you guys got going on?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. I think that's where we initially met. So they can find me on LinkedIn. We have our website is newcompass.com. And that it will take you to the software that we're building around these data sets. So either way, and happy to send over my contact information as well.
Perfect. Katherine, thank you so much. If you guys can't find Katherine out there, just hit me up. I will gladly put you guys in direct contact with her. But that is going to be it for today, ladies and gentlemen. As always, if you got value in what you heard and you're not subscribed, subscribe to the show, you guys. And if you're feeling ambitious, rank it on iTunes and Spotify, because if you see value, that's how your network's going to see it as well. I appreciate you guys. I love you guys. And we'll be talking to you soon.
Came back with a bang, window down, yelling out